What's happening, Sales Ascender? Sean here, back at you with another high-ticket tune-up. Are you ready to jump into it? In this video, I'm going to share 3 things that you can do to close more sales more confidently. Stay tuned. What's happening, Sales Ascender? Sean here, back at you with another high-ticket tune-up. I hope you had a great weekend and your week is off to a great start. I know mine is. Today, I'm going to focus on a couple of things. Got a great question that came in from Robbie. Robbie asked this. He says, Sean, how can I be more confident in closing? Well, I wanted to give you guys 3 tips that you can use to be more confident in closing high-ticket sales. So, number 1, remember this: practice makes permanent. Practice makes permanent. What do I mean? Well, the more you practice, the better you're going to become at something, right? They have, they always talk about Tim Ferriss. Actually, he talks about the 10,000 hour rule. There's a book called Outliers, actually originally brought this concept to life. And it was, if you do something for 10,000 hours, guess what? You're going to be considered an expert by everybody on earth. You'll probably climb into the top 1 to 3% of everybody that does that one thing. So with sales, there's no difference, right? It's just like anything else that you're doing. If you spend the time to practice, you create permanent routines, you'll be able to permanently answer all of these different objections that pop up in your world all the time. So number 1 is the more practice you get, the better off that you're going to be. Now, as we're talking about practice, like one of the things that becomes super vital and important for you to remember in your business is this: where is the opportunity coming from, right? So this is why I focus so hard. People come to me and they say, Sean, I want to learn to sell. And I'm like, great, I can teach you to sell in a weekend. But my question is, where's the consistent flow of opportunity going to be coming from you? So if you don't have a system in the front of your business that consistently and predictably puts the right amount of opportunity on your calendar or inside of your funnels or wherever it's going, definitely hit me up in a comment, hit me up in a personal message. I'd be happy to talk to you about that. I'm actually really good at that. I've been doing it for 21 years. But again, the point here is practice makes permanent. You need to get the reps. You need to get the swings at bat. And when you have more opportunities, you're going to do better. Moving on. What's number 2? So the first one is how to be more confident closing more deals. Practice for sure. Number 2 is this: know your audience, right? Your audience is going to be your audience. Your audience might change. It might deviate. But overall, your audience is going to have 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 different things that are synonymous or consistent with what it is that you do and how you serve them. And so knowing your audience means very simply understanding what problems do they have? What is the gap that's missing in their business that you can bring and solve for them? And if you know the gap and you know exactly what you need to share with them, then you can go into it and not share stuff when you're on a sales conversation, but ask questions as to whether or not they've actually jumped over the gap, right? Because most people will involve themselves or purchase something from somebody when there's a gap in what they're doing. And so your job as a sales professional is to very simply identify, hey, do you have this gap? This is the gap that I solve. I'm very good at it. And when your sales conversation becomes more so about that, then rather than, hey, this is what I do, this is how awesome I am, this is my company, this and you don't give your prospect the time and the room and the space to be able to share what they're struggling with and the gap that they have, guess what? You're not going to know that they have the gap because you didn't ask the questions, and you're not going to be able to plug the gap because you just didn't know, and you don't know what you don't know. So knowing your audience is so valuable. You got to understand what they all have, what they like, what they drive, how they eat, everything about them. Like, the more you study them, the better off you're going to be, because you'll understand where the stop gaps are. And your job as a sales professional, like I mentioned, is to talk about each one of those gaps. Lastly, but not least by any means, is don't dwell on mistakes. Most people, when they make a sales call and they make some sort of a mistake, they start beating themselves up. What happens during the sales call when you do this is it immediately lowers your personal confidence. The lower confidence means the lack of energy coming from you to the prospect. Prospect is going to feel the lack or the drop of energy, and you're probably not going to close the deal. So when you make a mistake, that's okay. Everybody makes mistakes. They always say, fail forward, fail fast, fail often, fail forward, just keep going, right? And don't dwell on your mistakes, especially when you're in a sales conversation. When you say something wrong, you're like, oh, I think I kind of messed that up. But here is the next thing. And then just move right through it. Don't think about it until after the sales call. Then what you're going to want to do is do a brief recap and understand how that mistake came up, and then understand what system you need to put in place to avoid that happening again. And once you do that over and over again, practice makes permanent. The number 1 thing that I shared today, that's that's going to be very, very important for you. And so everybody's going to make mistakes. You're going to say the wrong stuff, but just know it's okay. It's not your fault, right? It takes 10,000 hours to become an expert at something. So when you're in a sales conversation or a prospecting call and you say something wrong or something doesn't go right, that's okay. Just let it come. No expectations. One of the things, I just read this great book. It's called The Journey with Socrates, and it talks about, he's a warrior, and it talked about how he learned to fight. And one of the things that he was losing a lot of his fights because he would make a mistake in a fight, and then his opponent would capitalize on the mistake because he'd be thinking about it. Well, same thing in sales. When you go into a sales conversation, you're going to say the things that aren't probably perfect. You might have speech impediments or patterns like or like or and or any of this stuff. If you say that often, another one is literally. Most people say literally way too many times, right? If you listen for those speech patterns, I was in that trap. That's why I know that. But it was just a mistake. And so one of the things that I do is I really focus on just moving through. How you show up and flow through things is very, very important. And so don't dwell on your mistakes during a sales call. It's okay. You're a human being just like the person talking on the other end. And it's just like talking to a friend. And that's really what a sales conversation comes. Think about working with a friend. You know that you might make mistakes. They might make mistakes, and it's okay. Those are my 3 tips. Remember, practice makes permanent. Know your audience and don't dwell on your mistakes. And that will give you more confidence in order to close deals more effectively. I hope this helped you today. I love sharing this one with you, and I have a lot more coming. We're actually going to dive back into some of our body language series coming up here soon. But with that said, I hope you have a wonderful Tuesday, and I'll see you tomorrow.